My name is Naomi. I've been married for 20 years, living with my 19-year-old twins and my husband. I always thought we were just an ordinary couple. Raising twins was so challenging that we didn't think of having more kids, but we've managed to have a harmonious married life. After all, they were children we finally had after fertility treatments, and we've cared for them dearly together. I really love my children and my husband, and I believe he feels the same. That was until he brought up divorce today. Just a regular weekday dinner. My husband said he'd be a bit late today, so I decided to have dinner early with my daughter. In fact, today is our anniversary, so I made a slightly fancier meal than usual. Mom, it's rare for Dad to come home late on our anniversary. Yeah, but it's been 20 years. We can celebrate anniversaries and birthdays whenever we can fit them in now. Is that what marriage is like? Yeah. It'd be nice to always be in love, but it gets tiring sometimes. Saying that, you still love Dad a lot, don't you? Tonight's dinner is all his favorites. Oh, you noticed. Totally obvious. Amid such pleasant conversation, my husband came home just as we finished eating. I'm home. Welcome back. Dad, welcome back. Yeah. He seemed really tired. Are you okay? Yeah, just a bit tired. Are you gonna eat dinner? Yeah, I'll wash my hands first. Dad seems unusually worn out. Yeah, something might have happened at work. After a while, my husband returned. He ate his dinner in silence. It's rare for him to be this tired, but it might be best to let him be. I finished the dishes and was about to take a bath first when he stopped me. Naomi, I need to talk. What? Sarah, go upstairs. Sure. What's this talk about? But then my husband fell silent for a while. I started to feel anxious, wondering if it was something serious, and my stomach began to twist in knots. Hey, what's wrong? Are you okay? I'm sorry, but I want a divorce. What? The moment I heard those words, my mind went blank. Why? What did I do wrong? All these questions raced through my head. I'm really sorry, but I need to get divorced. Why? What's wrong with me? What are you dissatisfied with? If there's something wrong, I can fix it. Please reconsider. There's nothing wrong with you, Naomi. It's me. What do you mean? Then my husband fell silent again. Seeing me start to cry, he seemed to struggle to speak. The truth is, I've been having an affair and she's pregnant. What? So, I need to divorce you to marry her. An affair? Pregnant? What do you mean? I'm really sorry. But I love her, and I want to take responsibility for her. What? I know you can't understand. But, I need you to wait until after the baby is born for the alimony. I'll definitely pay. If I said I didn't want that, would you consider not divorcing me and not having the baby? I can't do that. I've already made up my mind. Made up your mind? You decided that on your own. What about my opinion? I think we had a good marriage, Naomi, and I'm grateful for that. But there's nothing I can do if I've fallen in love. Nothing you can do? Does that mean you don't love me anymore? I can't say I don't love you, but I can only see you as family now. So please, I'm asking for a divorce. With that, my husband stood up and started to clear the dishes. I'm not convinced, and I don't want a divorce, but it seems he's already decided. I guess I'm no longer in his heart. The kids are almost adults, and I felt I had no choice but to get divorced. I begged him over and over to reconsider, but he never agreed. Seeing him like that was too painful, and eventually, I decided to get divorced. Months later, I was so down that I couldn't even eat properly and lost about 22 pounds. To add insult to injury, I received an invitation to my ex-husband's wedding. As soon as I saw it, I felt dizzy and nauseous and couldn't leave the bathroom for about an hour. Mom, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. You don't look okay at all. What happened? This. What? My daughter was shocked when she saw the wedding invitation. What is this, that jerk? How awful. Normally, sending a wedding invitation to your ex-wife is unheard of. We need to send a will not attend reply. Wait a second, Mom. With that, she made a phone call. Roger will be here soon, let's discuss it. It seems she called our son who lives alone. About an hour later, he came home. What? An invitation arrived? Yes, look at this. Wow, what a tasteless invitation. Seriously, it's too crummy, right? It's fine, we're not going anyway. Hey Mom, can Roger and I go? Can we do anything? What do you mean? We're going to give this guy and his girl what they deserve. We'll tear it up and send them to hell. What? Stop it. Why? It's infuriating. Sending them to hell is something even God would forgive. But just stay quiet and watch, Mom. We've got it all planned out. Okay. In the 2 months leading up to the wedding, my son started coming home frequently. It seemed he and my daughter were up to something. I was torn about going, but I was worried about them, so I decided to go. On the day of the wedding, I really felt sluggish. Mom, you don't have to force yourself to go. But I'm worried about you too. There's nothing to worry about really. Yeah, we're adults after all. Still, I'm worried. Well, seeing it all firsthand might be more satisfying. I'm not sure if it'll be satisfying, but I'm sure it'll make me feel better than I do now. So the 3 of us arrived at the wedding venue. After checking in, we were waiting in the lobby when I needed to use the restroom, so I went with my daughter. There, a woman approached us. Excuse me, are you Naomi and your daughter? Oh, yes. Who might you be? I'm the bride, Henrietta. Thank you so much for coming today. I was joking when I sent the invitation. I never expected you'd actually respond with an RSVP. Really, thank you for letting me have such a wonderful husband. Excuse me. Could you please not raise your voice? It might startle the baby, you know? The ceremony will start soon anyway. Why don't you relax and have a drink in the meantime? Well, since I can't drink alcohol right now, it's a bit of a pity. But there are plenty of non-alcoholic drinks, so you can enjoy yourself too. Let's enjoy them together. The mistress looked at me with a triumphant smile while rubbing her belly. I couldn't bear to look at her. Oh, and the gender. We'll be announcing it soon, so please make a guess. You might be smiling now, but that won't last long. You must be upset that he chose me. But getting mad won't change anything. She smirked and walked away from us. I just collapsed right there. Mom, are you okay? Should we leave? No, I'm fine. I want to see your father one last time and talk to him. I'll stay till the end. Well, we'll have to talk eventually. Sarah muttered something meaningful. But at the time, I didn't understand what she meant. That would soon become clear as the wedding began. All the guests invited by my husband were strangers. They might have been hired for all I know. Of course, no relatives attended. When the bride walked down the aisle, her heel broke, and she nearly fell. The venue gasped. Immediately, staff rushed over and gave her another pair of heels to change into right there. After that, the ceremony ended, and it moved to the reception. During the grand entrance, the bride stepped on her dress, lost her balance, and dove into the audience. Her dress got stained with a guest's drink. With no spare dress apparently available, the reception continued as it was. The bride's face was already contorting. Then, it moved on to the gender reveal, which also ended in failure. The gender announced was the opposite of what was expected, and the bride was visibly shaken. The rest of the event continued to be sloppy until the outfit change. Hey, seems like one mishap after another at this wedding, huh? Yeah, it's honestly kind of funny. Well, this is all pretty mild though. They smirked as they spoke. Watching the bride struggle through this messy wedding, I thought she must be full of regrets. I felt a slight sense of schadenfreude. After the outfit change, the bride didn't look happy at all. The small mishaps continued, and just when it seemed like it was all over, the MC announced there was a surprise. The bride looked truly shocked, she hadn't known about it. "I'm a friend of the bride. On behalf of her friends, we made a surprise video. Congratulations on your wedding, I hope you find happiness." Just when I thought it was finally a wedding-like wedding, the video that played was horrific. The venue became quite noisy. "Wait, what's going on? Stop it now!" The bride screamed, but no one stopped it. The video showed evidence of her affair with my ex-husband, set to upbeat music. The ex-husband was stunned, and the bride was extremely agitated and distraught. Not only were there photos of him, but also many photos with several other men. After the video ended, the venue was dead silent. Unable to bear the atmosphere, the bride hurriedly left. The MC announced the end of the wedding reception, and people began to trickle out of the venue. As I hesitated, my children signaled for me to follow them. We ended up in the bride's dressing room. There were the bride and ex-husband, along with what seemed to be guests from the bride's side. And some staff. "This is the worst wedding ever, what is this? And I don't even like you, why would you arrange such a surprise?" How about that? A nice surprise, right? Not nice at all. It's the worst. And why are you all even here? We thought we'd drop some truth bombs here. Can I explain? Roger offered to explain. "Who are you?" "I'm your husband's son." "And this is my twin sister, Sarah. And this is our mother. Your ex-husband's ex-wife." "I know that." "Listen, everyone here was part of a plan to ruin today's wedding." "What?" "The broken heel, the table dive, the gender reveal, the video, and everything else were all planned by us here." "Why would you do that? Ruin someone's wedding for fun? Did you have fun ruining someone's marriage and love life? What are you talking about? What do you mean?" "Just listen, Dad. Let me show you that your choice was a mistake. I don't recall anything." "Well, your former boyfriend was a friend of mine. We met through a hobby and got close, but he's been really down lately, so when I heard his story, it sounded familiar, bingo. It turned out you were Dad's mistress. And when I told him that, he was shocked. He had something interesting, photos of you and Dad's affair. You were engaged, right? He went as far as hiring a detective to take those pictures. He was supposed to come today, but he decided not to. I've got all those photos of your face, sent to me. So, your former fiancé and I connected." "What? That's terrible. You're one to talk. There isn't a worse woman out there than you." "Hey, what's going on, Roger? Did these people also have something done to them by her?" "That's right." "What? I didn't do anything. This girl in the video had her boyfriend stolen by her. They were engaged to be married, but this woman went around bad-mouthing her, making up lies, and then got involved with him. Apparently, they broke up quickly after that. And this staff member here is my friend, and she too had her fiancé stolen by the same tactics." One of the girls started crying as she remembered. It's strange how these things pile up. Turns out there are many people like this, and when I talked to them, they all agreed to help. "Don't joke with me, that's old news." "So, Henrietta, you were doing things like that?" "Hey, Shane. This was when she was younger, okay? It was just youthful indiscretion. I definitely won't do it again." "Youthful indiscretion? You're still young. And aren't some of those photos in the video quite recent? And I didn't even know you were engaged before. That is, well, I had things I wanted to keep to myself." "Keep to yourself? I divorced to be with you, why didn't you tell me?" "Well, Shane, you were married. Being involved with someone who's married is risky, you know? Sorry to butt in while you two are arguing, but you were with that fiancé for 3 years, right? And Dad was only about half a year, right? So you've been deceiving me all along. Don't say things that sound so bad. I was just assessing my options. I dreamed of a perfect marriage. So to find the perfect person for me, I met, talked, and dated various people. What's wrong with that? Look, that's something you do when both parties are single. You don't go around breaking up families to do that. Stop lecturing me about my life. Besides, your father chose me over you all. He left you for me. That proves I'm better, doesn't it? It's ridiculous for you all, who were dumped, to criticize me. Hey, don't insult my kids. I never thought for a second that I had abandoned them. Why not? Since I married you, shouldn't you forget your previous family? We're supposed to be a family of 3 now, with this child, and you shouldn't see your old family anymore. Are you trying to deny my past? All right, enough. Can we have this conversation just between the two of you later? My story isn't finished yet. What now? There's more. By the way, how many months pregnant are you? I'm 7 months pregnant. Doesn't that mean you were still with your former fiancé? What? No, that's not true. Unfortunately, evidence suggests otherwise. You broke up with your ex-fiancé 3 months ago. Dad divorced Mom 2 months ago. Dad probably heard about the pregnancy 3 months ago. Pregnancy usually becomes apparent 2 weeks to a month after the act. So, it turns out, Dad and your fiancé were both involved with you at the same time. It seems your fiancé realized the affair a month before you broke up and avoided seeing you after that. So there's a high chance this child isn't Dad's. Dad, what do you think? What can I say? Was I being played for a fool? Don't spin weird theories. This child is definitely Shane's. Why are you so sure? Shane, why don't you trust me? Because I was careful, wasn't I? Accidents happen. Excuse me, may I interject? I spoke up as I noticed something felt off. What is it? That child is probably not Shane's. What? Out of the blue? Are you just saying that because you're upset I took your husband? That's not it. Then why would you say that? Shane, may I speak? Yeah, I thought something was off too, but I pretended not to notice. What? What's going on? We were blessed with these kids 20 years ago, but it took us 2 years to conceive. They were finally conceived through IVF. It took a lot of time and money. So? That means the child isn't Shane's? Yes, that's right. What? You're the one who had fertility issues. Unfortunately, it was Shane who was infertile. What? Shane had male infertility. We started trying to conceive and got worried when it didn't happen. We booked an appointment at the clinic, and I got tested first. I was fine, so we had Shane tested, and he was diagnosed with male infertility. After that, we went through surgery, tried IVF 3 times, and that's how these kids came about. We decided if we could have kids, we would. But, well, it never happened again. So no, it's not just about failing, it's that it's not easy for Shane to father a child. I wasn't aware of that. I'm sorry, I thought it was a miracle. I thought it was a gift from God that I could have a child despite being infertile. That's why I wanted to marry Henrietta. But now, I realize that was a mistake. It really isn't my child, is it? It is a miracle! Absolutely a miracle! It's Shane's child. I don't want to marry someone who's been two-timing. I dedicated my life to Henrietta, but she was only thinking of herself. We were supposed to register our marriage tomorrow, but I need to rethink this. Why? You already said we were getting married, and there's also this child. That child isn't mine, is it? I don't know. Henrietta, losing confidence after hearing about infertility, gave a vague answer. Everyone listened in silence to the exchange. It's not maybe, that child is definitely your ex-fiancé's. Well, you said he wouldn't have left if he knew about the pregnancy. You didn't tell your ex about the pregnancy, did you? That's right, I deliberately didn't. I wanted to marry someone who seemed like they could provide a happy marriage. Shane had a family, but he was responsible and wealthy, so I wanted to marry him. I tried to make it fail a few times, but it never worked. I never thought he was infertile. But I thought if I said I was pregnant, he would definitely marry me. That's why I used my ex. Just a few times and bingo. I even considered marrying him, but he lacked income and security. So I decided I definitely wanted to marry Shane. I never thought I'd be dumped first. Well, I was pregnant and it seemed like I could get married, so I gladly accepted it. This is the truth. How about that? Do you feel better now knowing the truth? You were using me? Whatever can be used, I'll use it. At that moment, I couldn't hold back and her hand flew towards Henrietta. What are you doing, you witch? I'm fine with being called a witch. What's fun about involving so many people and hurting them? At least I've been hurt enough to lose 22 pounds. It's bad enough that Shane got fooled by a woman like you, but you are the worst. This man, this child, and many others have been hurt by you. Your ex was loving and trusted you enough to want to marry you, but you valued him for his peace of mind and income and made decisions based on your own whims. Don't you feel sorry for that baby? Raising a child isn't as easy as just going along with your whims. Apologize. You've hurt everyone here, so apologize quickly. I scolded her as if she were her own child, raising my voice sternly. I haven't seen Mom get this angry in a long time. Right? Even Mom would lose her cool over this. Why should I apologize? When you do something wrong, apologizing is the least you can do. Overwhelmed by the forceful tone, Henrietta apologized. I'm sorry for causing trouble for so many people. That doesn't show sincerity. I'm sorry. As I made Henrietta apologize many times, applause erupted around me. Shane, I loved you. For a while, I was shocked and couldn't eat properly because you chose her over me. Despite the hardships over these 20 years together, there were far more joyful times, which is why I couldn't accept our divorce. But today, I've finally made peace with it. I loved your kindness and your sense of responsibility, but it's a shame that it backfired in the end. The man I loved is no longer there. I'll be expecting a fair settlement for alimony, so be prepared for that. All further communications will be through my lawyer. And Henrietta, you should also prepare yourself for alimony payments. It's unfortunate for you, but you're about to enter alimony hell since you rode on Shane's kindness to nearly secure a marriage. Saying that, I left the room. I was surprised at myself for speaking so clearly. It's been years since I could do that. I loved my ex-husband deeply, but seeing him deceived by a younger woman made him look pathetic, which helped me cut ties emotionally. That might have been what finally helped me let go of my feelings. Mom, that was so cool. It's amazing how clearly you could say that. Yeah, it's impressive. That must have put both that woman and your lousy father in their place. I didn't intend to say all that when I came here. What were you planning to say to Dad? I really loved Dad. Despite everything, I held on to that love until today. I wanted to tell him how much I loved him, and if there was a chance he would reconsider, I was a bit hopeful. But the dad I loved is gone. Fooled by such a woman, he just seemed like a pathetic old man, and loving him felt foolish. That's why I was finally able to accept the divorce. Mom, you're strong. Not really, it's thanks to you too. If you hadn't insisted on coming today, I would still be crying and unable to eat, stuck in the past. Well, if I have to thank you for anything, it's that I've lost 22 pounds at this age. Losing 22 pounds is great, but you need to gain back about 11 pounds. It's unhealthy otherwise. Oh, after finally losing weight. No way, you're not young anymore, you need to eat properly. Hey, not young is unnecessary. As we were about to leave, my ex-husband stopped me. Naomi, wait. Shane, what do you want? I really regret everything. It was all my fault. I regret our divorce so much. I don't know why, but I believed her. Can we please think this over again? I said I could only see you as family, but I failed to cherish that family. I realized I hurt that family. I love you, Naomi, truly, from the bottom of my heart. I want to try again, please. With that, my ex-husband broke down crying. Doesn't this seem familiar? Eh? When you brought up divorce, I cried and clung to you, begging to reconsider. If it hadn't come to this, I might have agreed if you spoke like this today. So, will you reconsider? Unfortunately, I don't love you anymore, and I can't. It's impossible to start over, and I'll make sure you pay the alimony. But Naomi, I really do regret everything. Anything more you say is useless. My mind is made up. I don't love you anymore. I've decided to live on my own. We'll talk through lawyers, take care. I said that and walked away from him. After saying goodbye to my children, I arrived home alone and cried out loud like a child. All the emotions I had been holding back seemed to overflow, and I eventually fell asleep. After that night, I never cried again. Months later, I hired a lawyer and met my ex-husband several times through him. He looked worn and had more gray hair and had lost weight. I managed to get $60,000 in alimony from my ex-husband and $50,000 from Henrietta. Henrietta asked to pay in installments, which I reluctantly accepted. My ex-husband paid in full, and since then, I haven't seen him. He reached out a few times wanting to reconcile, but I firmly refused each time. Eventually, the calls stopped. Henrietta continued to send a fixed amount every month. In the end, the two didn't register their marriage and started living separately the next day. The mistress was pregnant with her ex-fiancé's child and tried to contact him, but he never responded. It seems she ended up having the baby as a single mother, but I don't know what became of her afterward. My ex-husband became so gaunt that he fell ill and had to quit his job. Now, he's living a modest life alone. As for me, I'm enjoying being on my own. My daughter Sarah has moved out to live with her boyfriend, and Roger continues to live alone. Although the family home brings back painful memories at times, I've decided to live strongly and do what I love. With the alimony I received, I started a new hobby. Using my skills in handicrafts, I began making handcrafted items and posting photos online, which have been surprisingly well received. Interestingly, I've even received some advances from Roger's boss. While I'm not quite ready for a new relationship just after my divorce, I am planning to go out to dinner with him for the third time. Despite the tumultuous divorce, I am now living happily. Going forward, I plan to leisurely enjoy my alone time and, somewhat, romance too. And they all lived happily ever after. Let's live with my parents starting from today. They're my parents, so you won't mind, right? My husband suddenly said this. I was shocked, holding back tears. I stood in front of him. It's only been a few days since my father's funeral. This was just a few days after my father, who had battled illness, passed away. The chaos of the funeral was still fresh. Ignoring my feelings, my husband packed his things and left. His destination was the villa that I had just inherited, which my father cherished. Shockingly, his parents were waiting there, and they decided to stay at the villa. My name is Natalie. I just turned 33 and have just started out as an independent designer. I married Alex, and we have been living together in an apartment we signed for 3 years now. Perhaps I'm quite well known in my field as a designer. I have a good income, so the apartment is under my name, not my husband's. I lost my mother when I was in college, and within this past year, my father was diagnosed with malignant tumor, in other words, cancer. He was undergoing treatment, but it seemed like his time was near, and even the primary doctor suggested preparing for the worst. Although I lived away from home when I lost my mother, after joining a design firm, my father always kept in touch and maintained our relationship. The news of my dear father's illness hit me hard. As his condition worsened, I had sleepless nights. "How's your father doing?" The doctor said. "What? Is it that bad? Should I, as his son-in-law, visit him?" My husband would frequently ask about my father's health. But his tone seemed less about concern and more like he was anticipating my father's death. He always seemed discontented because he earned less than me. I wished he would be proud of my career achievements and support me. However, his behavior was like a competitive child. "My father said he wants us to cherish our time together and not worry about him." "But your father will be gone soon, right? So we should spend more time with him now, so we won't regret it later." I couldn't help but increasingly feel disgusted towards my husband. Initially in our marriage, he was loving, and our time together was always pleasant. But his insensitivity towards my father's illness was agonizing. I couldn't accept the change in him. He works from home. I also planned to work from home after becoming independent, but he said he couldn't concentrate, so I had to rent a separate office, requiring me to commute. It was convenient for visiting my ailing father, but my husband, despite being home most of the time, never helped with chores. I managed my father's hospital visits, made necessary arrangements, and completed my work tasks. Yet, when I returned home, I would find the mess he made, dirty dishes, and leftover food. He only sought his own comfort and was indifferent to my struggles and stress. I felt an overwhelming sense of loneliness and exhaustion. Eventually, my father passed away. During his lifetime, we had decided to dispose of our family home. So, while traveling from the hospital to the funeral home, I was busy with funeral preparations. However, while Alex was with me, he was either making calls, disappearing, or focusing on himself, not helping at all. "Alex, please help me. It's hard for me to handle all of this by myself, especially now." I tried telling him, but he took a call just as he was about to respond, and later, he just laughed it off, saying, "I'm busy with work." Anger and disappointment towards my husband grew inside me. Was it because I lost my father too soon? His words felt even colder. On the funeral day, he was deeply engrossed in conversations with his parents, and every time they returned, they all had smug smiles on their faces. The other attendees looked at us with strange eyes, and I felt increasingly isolated. Still, I managed to complete the funeral and burial smoothly and also wrapped up the inheritance procedures. My husband suddenly proposed. "Let's start living with my parents from today. They're my parents, so you shouldn't mind, right? If you do, then maybe we should get a divorce." He said this with a smirk. I was in turmoil, my grief over losing my father momentarily pushed aside as I urgently responded. "Live together where? In this apartment? There isn't any room. How would that work?" The lack of room was because we turned one room into an office and another into storage for his work materials. While our apartment is family-friendly, my husband had always said, and thus used it lavishly. "We're not having kids." And thus used it lavishly. With a grin, my husband said, "It's that villa you inherited." I was dumbstruck. Although we had sold the family home, I had kept the villa because it was my father's favorite, and of course, I had inherited it. That place was filled with memories of my father and held a special place in my heart. I intended to maintain it as per his last wishes, but my husband seemed to disregard my feelings entirely. "We really shouldn't use that villa." But he wouldn't listen. Incredibly, he said that his parents had already cancelled their apartment lease and finished moving into the villa. They probably communicated about this during my father's funeral, delegating responsibilities for the move. He likely believes the villa, being more spacious than our current place and located in a quiet area, would be a better living space. But that villa is filled with memories of my father. Living there with you all will be difficult. Remember that. Even though I protested, the move for his parents had already begun. When I pointed this out, he couldn't even hide his irritation. "You always think only about yourself. Always busy caring for your father, always getting called away. Do you even know how much I had to tolerate your daddy issues?" I was stunned by the raw feelings he revealed. "Now that he's finally dead, it's your turn to listen to me. He took an entire year, the old geezer." He continued to spew cold, harsh words. I was overwhelmed. I didn't want to believe this was who my husband truly was. But he definitely mocked both my father and me. I remembered my father's frail form curled up in the small hospital bed, fighting his illness. He had fought death to not leave his only daughter behind. Though I was left behind, would my father have wanted me to be at the mercy of my husband's whims? In that instant, I realized my love for my husband had vanished completely. At a time when I should have been mourning my father's death, my husband showed not a hint of emotion but rather seemed to revel in it. A tightness gripped my chest, making it hard to breathe. Nevertheless, I suppressed my feelings and repeatedly warned my husband. "It's fine to live in the villa, but you'll regret it." Laughing, Alex replied, "I won't." If he was going to be that adamant, then I'd accept his resolve. I packed only a day's worth of essentials and left the house. Seeing the minimal amount of stuff I'd packed, Alex looked suspicious. I simply responded, "I'll be back to tidy up later." Truthfully, I didn't want to speak another word to him. I had no desire to see the faces of his parents, probably elated over my father's death and the subsequent move. Yet, I silently followed behind Alex. I couldn't bear the thought of them treating the cherished place my father left me any way they pleased. Though it's called a villa, it's just a house in a coastal residential area. The neighborhood is filled with everyday people leading their lives. However, its close proximity to downtown and its location make the land quite valuable. Exiting the train station, the scenery, unchanged from my childhood, continued. I remembered how, when I was a child and would fall asleep during train rides, my father would often carry me on his back. When we arrived at the villa, my husband's parents were already inside. I felt suspicious, and it seemed that my husband had taken a key without my knowledge and made duplicates. This realization deepened my unease. The fact they had been surreptitiously planning to move into the villa without telling me. I couldn't feel any trust in them at all. When his parents looked around the villa, their eyes sparkled with delight. It was a single-family home, but it was filled with furnishings that my father loved. Some slightly different, Western-styled furniture probably reflected my mother's tastes. "Wow, this villa is fantastic. No more living in that cramped apartment. Living here, we're so blessed," exclaimed his mother. "The view from the second floor is wonderful. Your sneaky dad, hiding such a great house. He should have shared it, we're family after all," laughed his father. Their voices of joy grated on my nerves. They seemed to take my father's death too lightly. They saw the villa, an inheritance, merely as a luxury and beautiful stroke of luck. "Indeed, this place is the best. We really should be grateful to your father-in-law. Thanks for leaving this villa for us," said my husband, joining in on their tactless remarks and laughing. Then, claiming it to be a moving-in celebration, the three of them began opening beers. Preparing some snacks, I let out a deep sigh. The memories of the three of us at that dining table were slowly being tarnished. I spent that night with my emotions guarded. Early the next morning, I was jolted awake by his mother's shrill scream. "It has begun." I woke up to see my husband and his father frantically running to the source of the scream, and I followed shortly after. In the bathroom, his mother lay on the floor, clutching her foot, her face contorted in shock. "The floor suddenly gave way." Her face mixed fear and astonishment, and her panting echoed throughout. "It didn't give way. Maybe you just slipped?" My husband and his father inspected the spot she was pointing at, looking perplexed. However, the floor was gleaming and perfectly intact. Still, she kept insisting that the floor had given way. After watching them suspiciously examine the floor, I finally spoke. Did you step on that part of the floor with a slightly different color? The three of them looked at the spot in amazement. Pushing through the crowd, I stepped on the part with a different shade. Ah! My husband exclaimed in surprise. When I stepped on it, the floorboard made a crisp sound and sank a little. But when I took my foot off, it rose back to its original position. If you weren't aware and stepped on it, it would surely feel like the floor gave way. See, the floor sinks a bit. It's like a trap. What kind of contraption is this? Is this a defective house? Explaining calmly, I faced their pressing questions. It's not defective. My father had the house made this way. What? It's a trap house. Actually, my father was a hardcore ninja enthusiast. This villa, a culmination of his time and money, was his masterpiece and treasure. The times he brought me here during my childhood were so that he could adjust or add new traps during the summer or Christmas holidays. So, there are traps like the bathroom's pitfall spread all around the house. Shelves you shouldn't touch, floorboards you shouldn't step on, doors that won't open without a specific sequence, hidden doors, hidden rooms. It was a secret villa filled with my father's dreams. Naturally, it's not really suitable for everyday living. I've been visiting since I was a child and have instructions for all the traps from my father, but my husband and his family might not fare as well. I did tell you it's best not to live here, and it's a place filled with my father's memories. Everyone in the family knows how obsessed my father was with ninjas. In fact, it's more surprising that after being married for so many years, you didn't know. My husband, insisting he hadn't heard about the traps, was left speechless by my retort. His parents, of course, claimed they were hearing about it for the first time. They raged at my husband, blaming him for canceling their apartment lease, rendering them homeless. As the commotion continued, my father-in-law and husband got caught in another trap and tumbled over. The sight of the two sprawled out on the floor brought a brief smile to my face. But immediately, I composed myself and said, "Please, make yourself at home." They had been blinded by the villa's luxury, assuming it was a comfortable residence. They had ignored my warnings and failed to acknowledge the evident hobby of my father. Now, they faced the consequences. Even when made aware of the potential dangers, they responded dismissively. "It's fine. What's the big deal? It's not a problem." Hearing that, I responded with a confident smile. "Well, I have to prepare for my move, so I'll be returning to the apartment for a while." And I left the villa. But of course, I wasn't really preparing for a move. I took a few days off to sort out my father's belongings. As expected, just 2 days later, my husband and his parents couldn't handle the life full of traps in the villa. It was a short time, but I felt positive as I reflected and started making plans for a new life. Now, about my father's villa, after I moved out, it apparently gained quite a reputation as a tourist spot. It became known as the Mystery Mechanism Mansion, often featured in the local newsletters. Whenever the villa was occupied, like during my father's time, visitors would come from all over to see it. I do recall in my memories unfamiliar faces touring the villa, local children playing, and my father proudly showing off his prized mansion to many people. I believe my father had listed both the villa and our ancestral home's phone numbers in those newsletters. And now, the ancestral home's number no longer works. If there are inquiries, they would be directed at the villa. While I had honed my Chinese skills enough to handle calls from foreign guests, it seemed my husband and his parents hadn't. On top of being constantly on edge because of the mansion's many traps and handling visitors, and phone calls in foreign languages, they returned to the apartment looking utterly drained. "How about we all live in this apartment?" The one to broach the subject was my mother-in-law. Desperately wanting my father's villa, they gave it up in just 2 days. Instead of tea, I handed my husband the business card of a divorce lawyer. "We can't live together anymore, so please leave." Taking a deep sigh, I tried to explain patiently. Firstly, I couldn't stand his hasty decision to move in with his parents without any consideration. He never once discussed it with me nor sought my understanding. To begin with, I was handling all the household chores, and he never once cooperated. While the household matters became solely my responsibility, causing immense stress, he never showed any signs of considering my feelings. He completely disregarded my feelings, acting selfishly, even to the extent of moving in with his parents. There's no way I could continue living with someone like that. Didn't you love me? When my husband uttered such nonsense, I couldn't help but snort in amusement. How can I love someone who hoped for my father's early death and rejoiced when he passed away? I kicked the three of them out.
This is my house. You should be the one to leave.
My husband yelled, but I calmly retorted. Do you want to be reported for trespassing, or will you leave quietly? Did you forget that this apartment is in my name? At my words, they went silent. They had neither a house nor savings, and they were economically reliant. But before they could sweet-talk me, I was determined to evict them. Neither my husband nor my in-laws had much saved up. Having been evicted from the apartment and unable to return to the villa, they apparently now live together in a small, run-down apartment. This place is even smaller than the apartment we had before the villa. My in-laws complained constantly. My husband apologized at first, but gradually started to resent them. They, being elderly, seldom work and quit after just a few days when they do. Their savings and pensions are dwindling due to their continuous moving. They constantly complain about each other and argue daily. Considering their current living situation, where neighbors complain about noise and they retaliate with annoyances, it seems they'll need to find a new place soon. My ex-husband once comfortably worked from home in the apartment, but now, in their new place, there's no luxury of a dedicated workspace. His reputation plummeted, and sales dropped significantly. Now, he barely makes ends meet with late-night convenience store shifts. Juggling multiple part-time jobs seems more feasible now. It seems my in-laws believe their biggest mistake was getting roped into my husband's sweet talk. Every time they argue, they blame him for the issues with the trap-filled mansion. Alex would just turn beet red and shout in frustration.
You should have researched that house more. At least this wouldn't have happened. It's not my fault. That woman kept it a secret. Don't talk back. If you had a proper relationship with her father, this could have been avoided. How did we end up in this mess because of our son?
But let's not forget that they were the ones overjoyed at inheriting that mansion. I'll never forget that. After our divorce, I had a turning point in my career as a designer. Taking inspiration from my father's passing and recent events, I incorporated ninja designs and shared them on social media. Before I knew it, I became quite popular, and one day, a major cosmetic company reached out. They wanted a package design with an Asian flair featuring ninja elements. I instantly thought of my father. Of course, I eagerly joined the project, and after putting my heart and soul into it, it turned out to be a great success. My career became even more stable, and I had happy news to share at my parents' graves. The trap-filled mansion still stands. It's a place filled with special memories of my father and our family, so I've decided not to sell it. I've planned a proper visiting schedule. And with some tweaks, realized I can offer free access to tourists and local kids. Luckily, media interviews started pouring in. My dad's trap-filled mansion became a major selling point, and when I said I wanted to use the funds for maintenance, some media outlets were willing to pay a hefty price. Soon, articles about the mansion were translated into French online, dubbing it a wonderful ninja legacy. Donations started pouring in from abroad. The donor was an elderly ninja enthusiast, just like my dad. I'm thankful for the donations, but it seems I'll be busy managing the mansion for a while. Meanwhile, at the mansion, kids' eyes sparkle every day.
Wow, is this the legendary trap mansion? Are there real traps? Which ones? Show me.
Local volunteers help ensure the kids play safely. Beside them, tourists are amazed at the secret doors that open when floorboards are pressed.
Wow, this is amazing. We're so lucky to see such a special place. What other tricks are there here?
Even though my dad has passed away and I ended up divorcing because of the issues surrounding his legacy, I believe I've gained more than I've lost. The mansion has transformed into a new place where strangers can enjoy themselves and share memories of my dad. I've been reborn, looking forward to the future. I want a divorce. I can't take it anymore. At my words, James showed a look of surprise. For a wife to say such a thing to him was intolerable, and his expression slowly turned to one of anger. Being the CEO of a company, he has a lot of pride. Yet he lacked responsibility and the ability to reflect on his actions. His attitude negatively impacted both our home and his company.
Fine, but you're raising all 4 kids on your own. I won't be paying child support or any other bills.
Scoffing, James looked down on me, showing no sign that he thought his words were irresponsible. Even though 2 of those kids were from his previous marriage. But it doesn't matter if they're biologically mine or not. All 4 of them are my precious children. All right. No matter how hard it might be, I was determined to raise them myself. After we divorced and moved to our new place, James suddenly showed up.
Why did this happen to me?
Watching James in his distraught state, I couldn't help but silently laugh. Finally realizing, Enjoy, I thought. From now on, you're going to reap what you've sown. My name is Lydia, 34 years old. I'm a stay-at-home mom in a bustling household with my husband and 4 kids. Our children are eldest son Michael, 15, eldest daughter Sophia, 14, second son Jack, 8, and younger daughter Ava, 6. They're growing up fast, eating well, playing a lot, and thriving. Sure, they argue from time to time, but they get along great, and our home is always filled with laughter. James, who's now 39, is the CEO of a manufacturing company, and we remarried 9 years ago. Actually, Michael and Sophia are from his previous marriage, they're his stepchildren. His previous wife passed away 12 years ago. James had a good fortune to be greatly favored by Mr. Wilson, a major shareholder in his company. I've never met him. But he has been mentoring James, introducing him to business contacts and so on. Their friendship began when they met at a bar. Back then, James had just remarried me and was looking to expand his business. Learning of James's ambitions, Mr. Wilson bought shares in his company, enabling James to grow it further. Life is truly unpredictable. Ever since, Mr. Wilson has been a great support to James and his company. I met James when I worked as a receptionist at one of his business associates. My first impression of him was, what a refreshing CEO. He had a lovely smile and always made it a point to greet the receptionists with a "Take care" as he left. Looking back, that was when I found James most attractive and likable. James began to change after our marriage, as his company started to grow. He became arrogant and began taking people for granted. This was evident both at home, with me doing all the household chores, and at his workplace with his employees. Stay-at-home moms have it easy, huh? You probably can nap in the afternoon, right? Excuse me? Preparing meals for 6, packing lunches for the kids, doing laundry twice a day, cleaning, shopping. Where in the world does he think I have any downtime? On top of that, James never helps around the house. Sophia is prepping for high school entrance exams, and Ava, being 6, still needs a lot of assistance. Michael comes home late from soccer practice every day, and Jack often asks for help with his homework. I wish James, being the father, would lend a hand. It sure would make things easier. I've told him several times that just bringing money home doesn't make you a father. What are you talking about? I'm exhausted from work, you know? That's why I'm providing enough money for the household, right? Just a little effort would help. Like helping Michael with his homework, or advising Sophia about her college applications. When I get home, Michael's already asleep, isn't he? And as for Sophia, she'd probably find it easier to talk to her mother than her father. Fulfill your responsibilities as a mother, okay?
You're the one not fulfilling your duties as a father.
I slammed the table in frustration. He spends his nights out drinking, and on his days off, he's playing golf. He can't blame work for coming home late, and he's not home on weekends because he's out having fun.
Why don't you work then? I can stay at home if you want. But make sure you bring in the same amount of money. If you can't, then don't act so high and mighty.
And yet, he always blames everyone else. Lately, even the kids have started to avoid him and don't even attempt to make conversation. But James probably hasn't even noticed, and I doubt he feels lonely. It felt like he couldn't care less about the family and the kids. And if you thought he'd be more committed to his job in return, that didn't seem to be the case either. Every evening, he'd just rant about his employees.
Seriously, there's a lot of incompetent people these days.
To which I responded, "Don't say things like that. If there really are that many people struggling, why not provide additional training or change the way you mentor them?"
Huh?
James scowled deeply, shaking his head as if to say I didn't understand.
Training costs both money and time. I can't spend resources on those who can't do their jobs. But in the long run, that investment will pay off for the company.
After all, it's the people who keep the company running. I couldn't believe that a company that didn't value its workers could ever truly succeed.
And also, I put the expansion project in the hands of the department head, and it ended up failing. So I demoted him.
At James' words, I blurted out,
"What?"
In disbelief, I looked back at James' face. "That was your idea, wasn't it? You're the one who said the new project would definitely succeed."
Ugh, stop it. He's the head of that department, not me.
Regardless, you agreed to it, and it's not solely his fault, right? Every decision in the company is your responsibility as the CEO. That's what being a CEO is about.
Don't act like you know about running a business when you don't.
He'd always get defensive, refusing to listen to anyone's opinion or reflect on his actions. And eventually, even Mr. Wilson started to caution him.
Why is even Mr. Wilson on my case now? I haven't done anything wrong.
It's all because of these incompetent people. Apparently, he had requested Mr. Wilson for additional funding by issuing new shares, but he was turned down. I heard he was told that the company could go under at this rate. It makes sense. Mr. Wilson isn't investing just for fun. No matter how fond he is of James, he's not going to blindly fund reckless ventures. James needs to reflect on his actions and rethink his management style, but he stopped listening to both me and Mr. Wilson.
"Mom, look at this."
One day, after returning from high school, Michael handed me his smartphone. On the screen was a video of James entering a hotel with a young woman, their arms linked together.
"I was coming home from practice and saw Dad walking with this young lady. I followed and..."
I was so filled with rage that tears began to flow. He fails in his responsibilities to the company, as a father and as a husband. What a pitiful man. I knew it wasn't right to cry in front of my son, but the tears wouldn't stop. Michael kept patting my back in an attempt to comfort me.
"I'm sorry, Michael. I might divorce your father." "That's fine, Mom. It's your decision. But what about Sophia and me?"
I looked up, realizing Michael, who had grown taller than me, was genuinely concerned. "Silly boy." I stretched on my toes, ruffling Michael's hair.
"If you guys are okay with it, of course, you'll live with me."
Looking down at me, Michael smiled happily.
"We might have some financial troubles, but..."
As I wiped away my tears, Michael interrupted. "That's okay. We'll manage."
"Why do you think so?"
"Because I know you won't abandon us." With a certain confidence, Michael smiled. Immediately, I hired a private investigator to gather evidence. It turned out the woman was an employee at James' company, and the two of them had been seen entering hotels multiple times. A week passed, and I told the kids about my decision to divorce James. By that time, I had made up my mind, intending to get custody of the kids if they wished to live with me. James came home late again that night, without a hint of guilt. As he cheerfully began to remove his tie, I showed him the photos Michael had sent me.
"I can't bear it anymore. We're getting a divorce."
I laid out the evidence photos, and James looked shocked. Slowly, his expression turned to one of anger. I guessed his pride wouldn't let him accept being confronted this way by me. He scoffed.
Fine. You raise the 4 kids. Don't expect any child support or alimony.
With a dismissive laugh, James made it clear he felt no responsibility. But that was already my intention. No matter the hardships, I had decided to raise the kids myself. Okay. I looked straight into James' eyes and nodded. I'd work as hard as needed for the kids. They'd be far better off with me than with such a man. The next day. Mom, there's someone I want to introduce you to. While I was tidying up the house, Michael and Sophia came home with an elderly man. He seemed to be about 70, introducing himself with a gentle smile. It's a pleasure to meet you, Lydia. My name is Wilson. Wait, Mr. Wilson, as in? Yes, the major shareholder of James' company. I appreciate all you've done for us. I puzzled by this unexpected introduction. Why would Michael and Sophia bring Mr. Wilson home? Did they know him? Noticing my confusion, Sophia chuckled softly. Looking at me, she revealed. Actually, he's our grandfather. What? All 3 of them laughed at my stunned reaction. So, let me explain. Mr. Wilson began. I am the father of James' first wife. I divorced when my daughter was very young. I've always been focused on my work. Mr. Wilson had consistently paid child support even after his divorce. However, he never met or communicated with his daughter directly. He was completely dedicated to his job and didn't remarry. But after retiring and having some downtime, he began to wonder about his daughter. He wanted to see if his grown-up daughter, whom he knew nothing about, was leading a happy life. When he hired a detective to find out about her, he learned that both his daughter and her mother had passed away. Yet, Mr. Wilson found out about his grandchildren and that they were now being raised by his daughter's husband, James. He thought of introducing himself and offering support if James was raising them alone. However, it was right around the time James and I got remarried. That's why I hid the fact that I was his first wife's father when I approached James at the bar. I learned that he was having financial troubles with the company, so I offered to help. Mr. Wilson explained. So meeting in the bar wasn't by chance? Exactly. He replied. Apparently, about 3 years ago, he approached Michael and Sophia on their way home from school and told them he was their grandfather. Since then, they had been in touch quite often. Michael told me about your divorce. At first, I was thinking of just offering some financial assistance. He trailed off, gazing at me thoughtfully. Michael also told me about James having an affair with an employee and what he says about them at home. And how you've responded to all of it. He probably learned about James blaming and speaking ill of his employees. I've been aware of the complaints against James from his staff for some time now. I hoped he'd come around, but I've been pretty disappointed in him. Hearing your employees being badmouthed, especially regarding an affair with one of them, is quite unsettling. Especially blaming your subordinates for your own mistakes, that's not what a leader does. Mr. Wilson himself had run a business. He certainly had a strict perspective on what's expected of a company's president. That said, Lydia, I have a request for you. He said, looking serious. It took about a month to get everything set up. After the divorce, Mr. Wilson helped us purchase an apartment. It's a spacious place with 4 bedrooms, enough for the kids to live comfortably. Thanks to Mr. Wilson covering the down payment, I felt incredibly grateful. I can't thank you enough for all you've done. No worries, Lydia. You're gonna have to work hard from here on out. Mr. Wilson said with a warm smile. The kids were really helpful with the move, making the transition smooth. A few days later, in the middle of the day, the doorbell rang persistently. It kept ringing incessantly, and then there was loud, urgent knocking on the door. Checking the security camera, even though it's a secured apartment building, I saw James right at the entrance. How do you know where I live? How did you get in?
I hired a detective and found out. Open the door.
Excuse me? I'm not letting you in. The moment I turned off the monitor, the knocking intensified.
Please, open up.
I reluctantly opened the door to avoid disturbing the neighbors, but had no intention of letting him in further. So, what do you want? Standing firmly at the doorway, I crossed my arms and looked at James.
There's a shareholder meeting coming up. You still have shares in my company, right?
Yes, I do. So?
They're discussing my removal as CEO.
Of course, I knew. I had received the meeting notice detailing the agenda. James, losing his composure, pleaded.
Oppose it for me.
I wondered what was going through his mind. Was he desperately approaching each shareholder like this?
I can't get in touch with Mr. Wilson.
James was frantic in front of me.
Is even Mr. Wilson trying to remove me? Why am I facing this?
Inside, I couldn't help but laugh at the sight of the distressed James. Did he finally realize? If he thought he could still get help after ignoring all of Mr. Wilson's advice, he was really naive. Holding back my laughter, I responded with an indifferent face. Who knows? But my answer is clear. I'm in favor of your removal. Seeing James' face filled with despair, I told him to leave. Also, just a piece of advice. No one would want a CEO who abandons work to do this kind of thing in the middle of the day. I thought to myself, this will be interesting. From now on, you'll be facing the consequences of all your past actions. On the day of the shareholder meeting, James appeared at the venue with dark circles under his eyes, looking weary. I greeted Mr. Wilson, but Mr. Wilson only returned the nod with a stern face. The moderator started the meeting, and the proceedings got underway. The shareholders were abuzz with the news of James' potential dismissal. Some even called for James' immediate removal, but Mr. Wilson opposed it. We need him to understand why this is happening. James, looking at Mr. Wilson, was on the brink of tears. He couldn't fathom why someone who had always been kind to him would say such things. The reasons for the dismissal. Mr. Wilson began reading from documents detailing James' misdemeanors. Based on complaints from employees, researched over a month, reports, and testimonials. We have recorded audio, and some incidents are on security footage.
You're so incompetent. Is that why the performance is bad?
James' recorded outbursts echoed in the hall. The content was unbearable, even denying the personalities of the other party. On the large screen, a video showed James hitting an older male employee's head with a bundle of papers. The shareholders frowned. It wasn't just bad-mouthing his employees at home, James had been abusive at the company. This was his comeuppance for becoming arrogant, thinking he was favored, and not heeding Mr. Wilson's warnings.
It's not true. They kept bringing up requests and opinions without showing results.
James stood up, desperately trying to defend himself. Yet, as expected, voices criticized. Did you really need to go that far? Striking with a bundle of papers.
But the current audio and footage are malicious. Yes, I was framed.
James claimed it was odd that the voice recordings didn't capture what was said before he began shouting. He asserted in front of everyone that they selectively reported only the parts that favored their argument.
Even in the footage, there's no sound. You don't know what sort of rude things that employee said to me, do you?
No one was inclined to take James' side at face value. However, some did voice that if they were going to dismiss him, they wanted to ensure everything was done fairly. Looking at a slightly relieved James, Mr. Wilson and I exchanged glances. The more James resisted, the more evidence we'd present. James seemed unaware he was digging his own grave. Let's hear from him then. The former head of the planning division spoke. After the new venture that the CEO wanted failed, I was demoted. Even though he had followed every directive, he was made responsible when things went south.
That's not true. You failed, not me. Don't put this on me.
In response to James' rebuttal, the former head repeatedly stated, I simply followed instructions. Clenching his fist in frustration. When I looked back in surprise, all eyes were on me. Lydia is the former wife of our CEO. Could you repeat here what you told him? Prompted by Mr. Wilson, I stood up. Yes. The CEO is responsible for everything in the company. That's what being a CEO means. Mr. Wilson nodded. I feel the same way. And many shareholders nodded in agreement.
Wait. I may have demoted him, but I didn't fire him. The company, meaning me, bore the losses. Just for that, do I deserve to be dismissed?
James didn't show a hint of remorse. That was the main issue, but it seemed James hadn't learned. Mr. Wilson interjected. There's more. James exclaimed.
There's more?
Yes, there's more. Then, on the screen, a picture was displayed showing James entering a hotel with a female employee.
What?
James, in shock, lunged at me. Several shareholders restrained him.
Lydia! You showed this to Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Wilson promptly responded. No, she didn't. James quickly responded to Mr. Wilson with a puzzled.
Huh? But, other than Lydia, who could it be?
This was taken by my grandson, Michael.
What did you say? Grandson? Michael?
James was shocked, raising his voice in disbelief. Mr. Wilson smiled and nodded. If I tell you Michael and Sophia are my grandchildren, would you understand? James's eyes widened, and he sank to his knees. So all this while, the one who's been supporting me was... Because my daughter was in your care and you were raising my grandchildren. I believed in you, but you've changed. Just because I told Lydia to raise those kids, my life's over? It's because of your true character. James crouched on the floor, clutching his head, and began to sob. Now, everyone, the woman in the photo that caused the CEO's divorce is an employee of our company. This means the CEO made advances on an employee while he was still married. With his forehead still on the floor, James kept muttering.
Stop it, please stop.
Do you think he's still fit to be the CEO? With Mr. Wilson's words, the unanimous decision was made to dismiss James. After James was let go, I took on the role of CEO. Mr. Wilson valued the suggestions I had made earlier, like training for those who can't keep up with the work and trying different mentoring techniques. He wanted to see me in a leadership role. Some other shareholders also took a liking to me, and with the help of the employees, I've been working hard as CEO. James and the woman he cheated with found it too awkward to stay and left the company. I demanded compensation, so James had to sell his house. Apparently, after being forced to leave the company and the revelation to her parents, the woman broke up with him, hurling insults. As for us, we're living happily as a family of 5 in an apartment. On days I work late, Mr. Wilson comes over to watch the kids. Jack and Ava are equally fond of him, and they love spending time with Mr. Wilson. Michael and Sophia have started preparing dinner and waiting for me. I'm grateful to Mr. Wilson and the kids and am living every day to the fullest.